A great hero who ended the Avalon Empire's war, the Spear Knight Joshua Sanders was considered the strongest on the continent of Vagrant. Despite all of his strength, he was poisoned by his closest friends. Joshua was never a greedy person and never held any kind of greed for leadership. All he wanted was to show the world the greatness of the spear and to escape his sorrowful life as a concubine's son. Despite that and helping end a long-lasting civil war for his lord, who was also his best friend, Joshua was viewed as a threat by merely existing. Since the civil war is over and the Spear Knight is no longer needed, doesn't it make sense for the Empire to be rid of a powerful potential threat? His supposed allies thanked him for his service and set an explosive magic circle around him before leaving him to his death, and not even giving him the honor of watching him die. With only around 15 minutes left to live, Josh reaches for his spear Lugia, which begins to glow in a red light. He wraps his hand around the glowing spear and meets his end in an explosive blast. Suddenly, he awakes from a haystack as a child, returned to his past, and given a chance to do things over again. Joshua is confronted by a group of young men who ask what he's doing instead of cleaning after the horses. He remembers them as Duke Agnes's soldiers, Rolls, Royd, and Gort. Originally, he always pretended to be mute when they bullied him because speaking up would just cause them to beat him more. The bullies look to see if Lucia, Joshua's mother, is around. As an illegitimate child of the servant that Duke Agnes forcefully slept with, Joshua has to put up with bullying from the soldiers who know that he has royal blood in him. The soldiers continue speaking amongst themselves, going so far as to say that Duchess Vanessa said she would cover for them if they got rid of Joshua and Lucia. Since they insulted his mother and continue to threaten him, Joshua prepares for a fight. He doesn't have all of his former power, but the mana training method he knows is different from what normal people use. The effect is exceptional and allows people to reach an optimal state in a short time due to the way it doesn't trace or use mana located in the mana hall within the lower abdomen. Instead, the method uses the mana in the surroundings and enables the whole body to absorb mana to focus and utilize where it is needed in an instant. He doesn't have to go through the mana hall creation that every other mana user goes through, so it only makes sense that Joshua has a head start with the method. The bullies argue about whether to just beat him up or not and notice him standing still with his eyes shut. They mistake it for fear, but Joshua is attempting to move mana. It took him 10 years before, but since he already knows how to do it, he's able to move mana through his fist and knock out one of the bullies when they charge at him. One of the other two bullies, Royd, draws his sword and moves to attack Joshua. Joshua ducks below the swing and empowers his fist with mana again, hitting Royd square in the jaw and knocking him out as well. Feeling pain from his efforts, Joshua correctly analyzes Rolls to be the least impulsive of the group and bluffs with the threat, causing him to run. Joshua then collapses and faints. Rumors spread in the manor about how Joshua beat the 3 centurions and pretended to be mute. Exaggerated rumor or not, the rumors do their work and spread Joshua's feet to the people living there, who begin to wonder about a fight between him and young Master Babel over who becomes heir. Young Master Babel managed to become a mana user at the age of 14, which many believe to be a sign of him being a true genius. As they talk, Joshua enters the manor and states he is there on the Duke's summons to speak with him. The Duke speaks with Rolls, who shows his ruined orc leather armor to the Duke. If Joshua was able to ruin the armor to such a degree with his bare hands at the age of 9, he would have had to use mana. A 9-year-old using mana is unheard of throughout the entire history of the continent. Even then, he would need the skill of a B-class knight to ruin armor like that with his bare hands. Chief Chiffon just can't believe it and threatens Rolls. He prepares to draw his sword when the Duke stops him and heads out to go meet Joshua to figure out the truth of the matter. Young Master Babel tries to confront Joshua when he sees him in the hall, but Joshua ignores him and stares at the portrait of the current emperor, Marcus van Britten, with seething anger. He swears his revenge on Caesar von Britten in his mind when Babel attacks him for ignoring him. Joshua doesn't even dodge the attack. Instead, he catches Babel's fist with his hand and the Duke interrupts them before the fight can continue. Chiffon sees Joshua's refusal to kneel to the Duke and demands he pays respects. Still angry over his memories from seeing the portrait, Joshua realizes he can't just outright display hostility to the Duke if he wants to live. Ignoring his hostility, the Duke commands Joshua to approach so that he can confirm his usage of mana. Joshua fears the Duke finding mana in him, but before he's able to come up with any sort of plan, the Duke grabs his arm. The Duke senses nothing. While Chiffon feels relieved that there really isn't a mana hall, the Duke explains that it's not just the mana hall. He senses no mana at all within Joshua, which should be impossible because all living things have mana. Chiffon theorizes that it might be that Joshua was born with the inability to store mana, which is something that he's heard rumors of in other children. The Duke did sense a sticky and disgusting feeling from where Joshua's manor hall should be, and he wonders what Joshua could have done. He decides to keep an eye on Joshua and tells him to stay in the manor for the time being. Babel tries to argue, only to be interrupted and shut down. Continuing to speak, the Duke orders Chiffon to train Joshua in the basics of being a knight from the next day onward. With the conversation done, the Duke leaves while expressing his high hopes for Joshua. Chiffon leads Joshua to his new room and leaves him there. Joshua collapses on the bed and thinks about how the Duke seemed to find something in him. That night, Joshua continues to practice mana usage as he sneaks out of the castle. He feels pain in his mana hall again and senses his spear Lugia suppressing the clash of divine and demonic energy there. Lugia could be the solution to his problem, and he wonders about what would happen if he could control all of the energies clashing in his body. Elsewhere, his mother, Lucia, is being held and is knocked out in a struggle as the 3 soldiers that harass Joshua try to hold her. They move to pierce her throat with the sword when Joshua enters and orders them to stop. One of the soldiers realizes Joshua is completely different from when they dealt with them last time and tries to run. Showing some mercy, Joshua gives them a chance to run, but one still starts to approach. Mistaking Joshua's fearlessness for having been detected, one of the Duke's personally appointed Red Knights, Sir Kane, jumps down from the rafters. The soldiers salute the knight, but rather than let things go, Joshua speaks up about how he's under the Duke's command and the soldiers tried to harm him. According to the Duke's martial law, Sir Kane realizes that he has to immediately execute the soldiers. Joshua orders Kane to stop right after he subdues the soldiers and before he starts killing them. Since the Red Knight Order is the weakest of the 3 Knight Orders serving the ducal family, and he was chosen to observe him, then Kane is probably the lowest ranked of their order. Even so, he would have to be a strong C rank to be able to take down the Centurions with only a few swings of his sword. Joshua convinces Kane to follow his orders and spares the soldiers. Before he lets them go, Joshua tells them to tell everyone what happened and that anyone who tries something like that again will die. As a knight of the duchy, Kane has to serve the Duke until he's 23 years old, but after that he is free to choose his own master. With that choice coming up for him in only a year, Kane decides to observe Joshua more and serve him when the time comes. Lucia wakes up and Joshua hugs his mother. With his second chance, he promises himself that he will be proactive and do things differently. Back in the mansion, Chiffon and the Duke speak of Count Rebecca visiting and bringing his daughter, Lady Iselin, with him. Though Count Rebecca isn't as high ranked as the Duke, he has great influence throughout the Empire, and his daughter Iselin is a genius known to be gifted with the blessing of mana. Count Rebecca hopes to marry his daughter to Babel, but Babel already has Lady Cheryl, the daughter of one of the 5 great duchies. Suddenly the Duke stops and asks about Joshua, having the thought of marrying him to Iselin instead. Joshua climbs to the northern part of the Duke's garden, where there rests an old tree he often visited before his regression. During his visits back then, he discovered a secret path by chance that led to Lugia. Following the same path, Joshua walks through a ruined temple. Unlike his past memories, the temple is largely ruined, and there only rests an iron rod where Lugia should be. When he picks up the iron rod, Joshua is transported to a void-like white space and speaks with the iron rod that reveals itself to be the demon god's spirit, Lugia. Does that mean that the spear Joshua spent his life with was a treasure of the demon god? They don't have much time to talk, and Lugia explains that the 2 energies in Joshua's body will eat away at his life as time passes. If he wants to survive, Joshua will have to rapidly recover his strength and reach at least Magic Spear Arts Stage 4. Stage 4 would just be below Stage 5, which allows Joshua to become the strongest knight in the Empire. At Stage 4, he would be an uncontested B rank. The difficulty of it isn't something Joshua is worried about since he's already done it before, but he is worried about the time frame. Lugia comforts him and lets him know that he will be able to use a certain amount of mana without consequence. Lugia tries to speak more, but is interrupted and fades after it speaks of Joshua reaching supremacy and searching for even more strength. He appears back in the ruined temple with the iron rod, Lugia, and Joshua is able to use Magic Spear Arts Stage 1. Sometime before this in the manor, Duke Agnes greets Lady Cheryl and Count Cox, a retainer of the Pontier family, along with Count Rebecca and Iselin. Cheryl brings up the rumor of Joshua beating up 3 soldiers, and Cox tries to berate her for her callousness. Chiffon speaks up as well, stating that Joshua has a weak body and was even born with a mana curse, so him beating 3 soldiers is hardly likely. Count Rebecca wonders about Joshua's mana curse before Duke Agnes asks him if he would like to take a look at Joshua as one of the handful of 5th-class magicians in the Empire. Rebecca agrees, and Chiffon asks the Duke if he would like to confirm the rumors and check if Joshua was really born with a mana defect before leaving for the capital. His plan is to place a knight to watch Joshua, which explains why Cain was following him from the rafters. Later, when Cain reports the conflict with the soldiers to Shaphan, he asks if Cain really crippled 2 soldiers over a simple servant. Cain's argument is that, rather than a servant, Lucia is officially the Duke's second wife, so mere soldiers shouldn't be trying to hurt her. Shaphan lets the matter go and instead asks Cain to spar with Joshua to test his abilities. Shaphan speaks lowly of Joshua, but Cain remembers the look in his eyes, the look of someone who could tear the skies and split the earth. Shaphan orders Cain to inject a small amount of mana into Joshua as they spar, which would poison him if he was born with a mana curse and kill him within 10 days. As Shaphan is his direct superior, Cain can't disagree, though he doesn't like it. When Cain later meets Joshua in the smaller training grounds for their spar, he's already resolved that he will protect Joshua. Cain even tells Joshua that he doesn't intend to really spar with him, but Joshua convinces him otherwise and orders him to do his best. Duke Agnes, Shaphan, and others arrive to spectate, and Joshua gives the Duke proper respects this time. Now that Joshua realizes Shaphan sides with Babel, he's more prepared for his schemes. At the last minute, Agnes reveals that Joshua will actually be fighting Babel, who walks forward and taunts Joshua. Because it's just a spar, the Duke declares they'll be using wooden training swords. Playing along, Joshua picks up a broom and snaps the end off so he has a long pole resembling a spear. His antics make Cheryl laugh, and the Duke confirms his decision to use the wooden pole in the spar. Due to the spar's nature, Agnes orders Babel to refrain from using mana, and so the spar begins. Babel rushes forward, relying on his speed. Joshua then continues to batter Babel with the pole, and Babel breaks the rules and uses mana to empower his attack in a fit of anger. In response, Joshua uses his own mana on his wooden pole to block the attack. Joshua doesn't really care about becoming the heir either way because the dukedom is set to vanish due to civil war in 10 years. But Babel sees him as a threat to the title and draws his real sword. Since he has the opportunity anyway and the dukedom will be of help to his plans, Joshua resolves to take it all anyway. The Duke stops the fight with a blast of mana, and Rebecca analyzes it as a different type and concentration of mana. Duke Agnes tells Joshua to meet him in his personal room that night, which comes as a surprise to everyone because the Duke never meets people in his room. Later on, Cheryl jumps on the bed in the guest room and goes on about how amazing Joshua is and decides to make him hers. Duchess Vanessa slaps Shaphan when she hears the news that Babel lost to Joshua. The Duchess beats him more and asks him what happened next, to which Shaphan replies that the Duke will be taking Joshua to the capital with him. Shaphan still has a plan in mind to placate the Duchess. If the Duke announces that Joshua is a C-rank mana user to the Empire, then Joshua will need to duel a member of the Royal Knights to show that he can use mana in battle. Duchess Vanessa looks ecstatic at the thought and plans to contact her uncle with a scheme in mind. Joshua knocks and enters the Duke's room with his permission. After Joshua kneels, the Duke asks him who he really is. When Joshua gives his name, the Duke asks if Joshua resents him. Joshua denies such resentment and instead asks the Duke for a favor. He's confident that the Duke will take him to the capital and explains why before asking the Duke to send him to the Academy, a school for sons of royal families within the Avalon Empire to attend between the ages of 10 and 15. The Duke offers to teach him the sword, but Joshua insists on the spear as his main weapon. This angers the Duke, and he exudes mana as he questions Joshua's usage of the spear. Joshua reaffirms his decision to use the spear and even states that he will defeat the 9 stars with it as his weapon. Since Duke Agnes is a member of the 9 stars, he intends to test Joshua's talent of the spear, and if he passes, he'll allow him to use the spear and even send him to the Academy. Elsewhere, Duchess Vanessa speaks to her uncle through a communication ball and begins to ask him for a favor. When Joshua leaves Duke Agnes's room, Babel confronts him again and asks him to follow. Babel demands a rematch, the fire of determination in his eyes. Deep within the Avalon Empire's great imperial palace, Marcus Van Britten hears of a rising star in the Agnes Duchy. The Emperor shows envy at Agnes's good fortune. When his servant tries to praise the imperial lineage, the Emperor rebuffs him. While the imperial princes have inherited some talent, none show great talent in martial arts like the Emperor, who shows such skill as a master warrior. The Agnes Duchy will be requesting a dispatch from the Imperial Knight Order to test his skills, and though the Emperor wants to personally go, he decides to send one of the princes instead. In the duchy, Babel and Joshua continue with their second spar, and Joshua beats Babel back with the mana on his bare fists. Babel tries to launch another attack with his sword, but Joshua concentrates his mana on his body and blows Babel away. Joshua voices that he would like to rip Babel apart, but that he will let him go due to the passion for martial arts he saw in his eyes. The next day, Joshua wakes up and answers a knock at his room door. Cheryl greets him and tries to enter the room, but Joshua stops her and even tells her off before slamming the door in her face. There are more knocking sounds at the door, and Joshua opens it again with harsh words, but he sees Cain standing there in shock instead. Joshua apologizes and asks if certain preparations are done, and Cain confirms. In the large training hall, soldiers gather at a summons from Knight Cain, who walks into the room with Joshua. Joshua states that he will be training all of them before ordering them to attack him. When he sees that they're hesitating, Joshua confronts the soldier he previously told to spread the word and harasses him. The soldier begs for another chance, and the others start to believe the rumors. Joshua orders him to attack before using mana to blast the soldier across the room and telling the others not to judge based on appearance. With that, the soldiers bow to Joshua and accept his training. Back in the guest room, Cheryl hugs her stuffed animal in shock and remembers Joshua's harsh words toward her. Count Cox arrives with the news that the Imperial Knights will be arriving soon, but Cheryl tells him to leave her alone. Joshua is summoned to Duke Agnes's office again after his display with hurting another soldier, and he explains his actions in the light of punishing the soldier for insulting nobility. The Duke already knew this and would have even killed the soldier with no hesitation in Joshua's place. Furthermore, Joshua explains he needed to gain their respect by planting fear in them, so that they would no longer confront him or his mother. They prepared to see the Imperial Knights to have Joshua tested. Golden Mane Knight leader Armstrong waits in anticipation for the test and bickers with Chiffon until Agnes and Joshua greet them, and they see the Imperial Knights arriving with the 4th Prince, Joshua's enemy, Caesar von Britain. The 1st Imperial Battalion Knight Order Captain, Joker, is known for bullying newbies trying to join the Imperial Knight Order. As the one with connections to Duchess Vanessa, he holds an agenda against Joshua as well. When Joshua is told to mind his manners in front of the prince, he instead praises the Emperor's royalty and declares he only swears fealty to the Emperor, not the princes. The prince's guard draw their swords at Joshua's hostile behavior, and Duke Agnes intervenes, telling Joshua to apologize to the prince. Rather than accept an apology, the prince lets it go and implies that Joshua will have to back up his words with strength. Joker steps forward and requests to test Joshua, and the prince agrees that it would be a good idea to overlook the mana identification process and proceed directly to the practical test. They all gather in the large training hall. Joshua and Joker face each other, a metal pole against a sword. Joker ridicules Joshua's weapon and proceeds to explain the test until Joshua launches an attack. Since Joker is limiting himself to C-rank abilities, Joshua is able to fend him off and even displays better techniques. Joker suddenly makes a large display of power that only Duke Agnes would be able to stand against, as he goes beyond a B rank in terms of mana usage. Joshua is able to block the first attack, and Joker continues to pour out mana in an attempt to overwhelm Joshua. An explosion of power goes off and ruins the floor as Joker is pushed back, and Joshua's iron pole transforms into a spear. Lugia is revealed to the audience, and Caesar asks about ending the test there since they confirm Joshua's skills. Before Joker can continue to attack, Sir Balmog, one of the prince's knights, ends the test and declares Joshua as a C-rank knight. Joshua, still planning the destruction of everyone there, hesitates, and Duke Agnes asks him if he's okay in a rare display of emotion. This marks the declaration of the youngest mana user in the world. Later that night, the Agnes family gathers for a regular meeting. It's reported that the Golden Mane Knights returned early from an expedition after hearing that monsters approaching villages in the Northern Territories have multiplied. That being the case, the biggest reason for their return was due to the appearance of black ogres alongside the other monsters. Even within the Forest of Dark Beings, black ogres are considered the strongest. When it comes to strength, Class 4 High Magicians and Knights with skills greater than B rank would find them difficult to deal with. As such, Duke Agnes decides to take care of the issue himself and moves on to the next topic, something regarding the Pontier family that Cheryl is from. He decides to hear the report in private and moves on to ask if anyone else would like to speak. Chiffon raises his hand and speaks up about Joshua. He tries to raise suspicion on Joshua's strength and the impossibility of his sudden rise in power, and suggests that Joshua is borrowing the power of a dangerous outer source. He uses the spear Joshua summoned to support his claim. It was clearly a shape-changing artifact, and Chiffon claims a spear shouldn't hold such power. Finally, he hammers the point home by saying he felt something like demonic energy during Joshua's fight against Joker. As a taboo magic, demonic energy would spell trouble for the ducal family. The family starts to agree with Chiffon when Joshua barges into the room and challenges him to a fight. If he can't prove Joshua is using demonic energy, he'll lose either way when it comes to a duel. Before it can escalate, the Duke interrupts and invalidates Chiffon's claims by bringing up that Magician Evergrant was the one to check Joshua's mana. If Joshua was using demonic energy, it would have been noticed then. Though that issue might be resolved, Duke Agnes still has many questions, and he intends to take Joshua to the Forest of Dark Beings to get some answers. Of course, the others at the table try to tell the Duke it's too dangerous, but who are they to question the Duke? He's going to resolve the issue of the Forest of Dark Beings with Joshua and then enroll him in the academy. Though it might be suspicious, nobody can deny that Joshua truly has talent. It's only right that he's given a fair opportunity. Chiffon can't help but feel threatened. If Joshua continues like this, then Babel's position as heir might be at risk. He's more certain than ever that he needs to get rid of Joshua. Joshua makes one last request. He wants his mother to accompany him to the capital. This will make it so Chiffon has even less to threaten the boy with, so he immediately tries to shut the idea down. Unfortunately for him, the Duke agrees. Nobody else raises any complaints, and the meeting ends there. Before they can all leave, Babel enters the room and kneels before his father. Something feels different about him, and the Duke asks him to speak his mind. Babel turns to Joshua and speaks his name, and Joshua gives a casual answer in response. Again, Chiffon berates Joshua for addressing his superior in such a casual manner. And again, Joshua puts the man in his place and questions where his true loyalties lie. Shouldn't he only be loyal to the Duke? Babel tells Chiffon he's done enough. Joshua isn't wrong after all. Rather than swearing revenge or making more terrible remarks, Babel swears to honor the family tradition of proving yourself with your own skills, and requests to officially renounce his seat as the heir. It's not that he gave up after being beaten. Instead, he wants to compete for the seat fairly. The Duke promises to think about the request and formally ends the meeting. Later, Duchess Vanessa speaks with Chiffon in her room, enraged by recent events. She desperately wants her son to be the heir, and even threatens Chiffon with revealing his traitorous agreement with her if it looks like Babel might not succeed. Chiffon reports that the Duke plans to go with Joshua to the forest before heading to the capital, and that gives Vanessa an idea to invite Joshua and his mother for what she plans to be their final meal. Before they leave for the forest, the Duke has a private meeting with Joshua and discusses temporarily discarding the Agnes name once he goes to the academy for secrecy. As a favor for doing so, he gives Joshua a gift, the Dawn Ring, an item created by the magic tower that allows the wearer to coat themselves in a suit of armor the moment they inject mana into the ring. Normally, the ring is only given to the family heir, but this is a special occasion. Once activated, the magic armor also bears the symbol of the family the wearer belongs to, so it can be used to ward off unwanted pests if he needs to show his backing. Other than that, Joshua will be posing in the academy as the heir of a nameless viscount. This is all in the name of trying to dissuade others from touching him. Finally, the Duke asks Joshua if he resents him. Joshua doesn't have an immediate answer. Since he regressed, he knows that even the seemingly powerful Duke dies in the upcoming war. The Duke never paid attention to him, and his mother died due to the Duke's neglect in that timeline. But now, things are different. The next morning, the prince speaks with Joshua one more time and tries to convince him to join the Imperial Knights. Little does the prince know that Joshua has to fight the urge to kill him then and there. He needs to join the Imperial Knights and become a battalion commander anyway in order to regain his other faithful weapon from before his regression. The expedition team, composed of 100 people, soon departs, and arrives at the castle bordering the Forest of Dark Beings. When they arrive, Rovan, a retired senior Clover Knight who previously served the Agnes household, greets them. It isn't long until the lord of the territory and Vanessa's relative, Viscount Big, rushes out with his daughter, Enna, to greet them as well. Based on their tense interaction, it's clear that the Duke has no love for Viscount Big. Of course, Big doesn't recognize Joshua and at first misunderstands when he hears that the boy is the Duke's second son and assumes that Vanessa had another child. Chiffon is quick to whisper that the boy isn't Vanessa's, and he isn't even from a noble family. Big immediately changes his previously jolly atmosphere and calls Joshua a filthy bastard. Big and Joshua stare each other down for a few moments and are interrupted after the Duke tries to turn the topic to the matter at hand. The Viscount tries to delay more and serve them a meal, but Duke Agnes declares that they'll be leaving for the forest at once. The Viscount even insists on going with the Duke and shows them his daughter's talent for spirit arts. Going by number alone, spirit users are much rarer than mages. The girl seems strangely familiar, but Joshua is sure he's never heard of a spirit user named Enna before. The Duke relents and allows Big and Enna to go with them. Elsewhere, within the Imperial Palace, the Emperor hears a report of just how strong Joshua is from magician Evergrant. Since Evergrant is the strongest magician in the Empire, the Emperor asks him just how much potential he thinks Joshua has. Evergrant says he believes the boy will even be capable of defeating him in the future, though not yet, of course. The mage refuses to answer when the Emperor asks who he thinks would win between them. Obviously, Evergrande thinks he could beat the Emperor, so just how strong could the boy be if he has enough potential to defeat Evergrande in a few years? The Emperor is looking forward to bringing Joshua to the palace to meet him in person. We go back to Joshua's group and see they've set up camp in one of the forest clearings for the night. Viscount Big shows just how much he hasn't been paying attention when he asks why they haven't gone deeper and worries about being ambushed. What he overlooked is that the monsters generally attack at night, and their aggressiveness is especially evident during a red moon. The biggest problem is that the monsters are attacking more frequently. Since night is going to come soon and they haven't scouted the area, it would be foolish to attack when they can just set up defenses and wait for the monsters to come to them. While they're preparing for the night, Joshua sneaks off into the forest with the goal in mind, and we see Viscount Big watching him from behind a tree not far away. Joshua is after a primordial stone, an object born from the power of origin. It's assumed that there's a primordial stone for each element, but only 5 were ever found in Joshua's original timeline, and all of them were found further in the future than where Joshua is currently. As for what they can actually do, a single primordial stone can increase magic spell levels from 1st circle to 3rd. Both mages and knights alike seek the stones. From what Joshua can remember, one of those stones is deep within the forest of dark beings, and he's certain it's the only thing that can restrain the powers clashing within him. Time passes, and he advances into the forest until having to hide from a black ogre. He prepares to ambush the monster, but it senses him and launches an attack before he can finish it in one blow. The red moon overhead only makes things worse. He hides in a tree and uses a technique he learned from an old friend, the Assassin King, before his regression that allows him to hide himself from the black ogre's perception. The ogre passes him, and everything looks fine until he misplaces a step and breaks a branch, which sends him tumbling through the trees. It only takes moments for monsters to gather around him, and he uses his power to perform the Stage 2 Magic Spear Art's second technique, Howling Wind, blowing everything around himself away. The technique leaves him exhausted, but does its job and defeats the monsters. Now he just needs to get the primordial stone and return as quickly as possible to help the knights. Back at the camp, we see the attack already underway. Hordes of monsters swarm them, and they weren't ready for the red moon yet. It was supposed to appear the next night. The black ogre emerges from the forest, and Chiffon, the only knight above B rank in his area, rushes forward as the only one who can deal with it. Purple energy surrounds his sword, but the ogre swats him away into the ground. Chiffon starts to think hope is lost until Duke Agnes himself steps up and takes charge. A single swing from the Duke's sword sends out a wave of power that eliminates hundreds of the swarming monsters. This is the power of a master-ranked knight. The monsters hesitate when they see the Duke's power, and Viscount Big takes the moment of rest to run up to Chiffon and ask about where Joshua is. He tries to claim Joshua ran off to save his own life, but the Duke shuts the rumors down with a quick yell. They have more important things to worry about. Babel charges forward with a few faithful followers as the monsters retreat, but it turns out to be a trap. They're lured straight into a squad of black ogres that decimate their forces. Just in time, Joshua shoots from the sky like a meteor and knocks out a black ogre in a single strike. Viscount Big, not wanting to give Joshua even an ounce of credit during a life or death situation, screams that the boy just came out after hiding to steal the kill and try to take credit. Joshua refuses to be looked down on, and prepares every ounce of strength he can muster. He now has the primordial stone of lightning after all, and what use is power if you don't use it? He rushes forward towards the rest of the black ogres and summons up lightning to use the thunderstorm technique, killing another ogre in one go. Not even Big can claim Joshua is using underhanded tricks now, and to use mana with elemental properties on top of that, the soldiers who see it think he must be a magic swordsman. When the boy finally collapses from overexertion, the Duke suddenly appears and saves him. While Joshua sleeps, he dreams of the Agnes mansion burning. It's too realistic to be a dream, and he realizes it's a vision of when the Agnes Duchy collapsed into nothing after he sees a grown Babel emerging from the burning building. In the vision, he sees Enna annihilating the mansion and confronting Babel with her wind spirit as she cooperates with the sinister mastermind behind it, Droxia Belle Grace. He then wakes back up in a bed, sore and hurting from the after effects of using his abilities. Judging from the power he used against the ogres, he thinks he can probably go against knights in the early stages of B rank thanks to the lightning from the primordial stone. At the immediate moment though, the most surprising is that the Duke is waiting at his bedside. The black ogres have been dealt with, so all that's left is to go back to the estate before discarding Joshua's family identity and sending him off to the academy. We hope you enjoyed the story so far. Check out the legendary Spearman returns to find out how Joshua reclaims his powers and gets his revenge.